The stars looked different from the bridge of the Valiant Dawn. Captain Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the endless void through the massive viewport. He had been in space for 15 years, but the sight never got old. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, the soft beeping of computers filling the air. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Coalition High Command," Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez said from her tactical station. Her dark eyes flicked across multiple screens, reading data faster than most people could blink. Jake turned away from the viewport. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a crystalline figure that seemed to be made of living glass. War leader Kristallos of the Vaxori looked down at Jake with what might have been disdain. It was hard to tell with aliens whose faces didn't move like human ones. "Captain Morrison," Kristallos said, his voice sounding like wind chimes in a storm, "your presence has been noted in Sector 7. You will withdraw immediately. This matter does not concern the Terran forces." Jake felt his jaw tighten. "With respect, War Leader, we received the same distress signal you did. Those colonies are screaming for help. The Coalition will handle this threat according to proper protocols. Your species is too young to understand the complexities of galactic warfare. Return to your patrol route." The transmission ended before Jake could respond. He stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space where Kristallos had been. Behind him, Amy made a disgusted sound. "Proper protocols," she muttered. "People are dying out there." "I know," Jake said quietly. He had read the reports. 3 colony worlds had gone dark in the last month. When Coalition scout ships finally arrived, they found nothing but ruins and bodies. Whatever was attacking them didn't take prisoners. Sergeant Kyle Bennett walked onto the bridge, his heavy boots making solid thuds on the metal floor. The Marine squad leader was built like a tank, with scars on his hands that told stories he never talked about. "Captain, my boys are getting restless. When do we move?" "We don't," Jake said, hating the words even as he spoke them. "Admiral Carter's orders are clear. We observe only. No engagement without Coalition approval." Kyle's expression darkened. "So we just watch people die?" "Those are our orders, Sergeant." Kyle nodded slowly, but Jake could see the anger in his eyes. It was the same anger he felt himself. They were soldiers trained to fight, to protect. Being told to stand down while innocents died went against everything they believed in. The next few days crawled by like years. The Valiant Dawn hung in space just outside the Talaxon system, close enough to monitor the battle but far enough to avoid accusations of interference. Jake barely slept, spending most of his time on the bridge, watching the tactical displays. Dr. Lisa Chang, the ship's xenobiologist, brought him coffee on the 3rd day. She was a small woman with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. "You look terrible," she said, handing him the cup. "Thanks," Jake said, taking a sip. The coffee was terrible, but it was hot. "I've been studying the enemy tactics," Lisa said, pulling up data on a nearby screen. "The Coalition calls them the Crovathan Swarm. They're unlike anything in the galactic database. They don't follow any known pattern of warfare." "What do you mean?" "Watch this." Lisa played footage from one of the destroyed colonies. Jake watched as black shapes swarmed over defensive positions, moving like liquid shadows. They didn't march in formation or maintain supply lines. They just attacked, wave after wave, learning from each failure and adapting. "The Coalition fleets are fighting them like they're a conventional army," Lisa continued. "Honor duels, measured responses, targeting only military installations. But the Crovathan don't care about honor. They hit everywhere at once, targeting civilians, infrastructure, anything that creates chaos." Jake studied the footage, his military mind already analyzing potential countermeasures. "They're fighting a total war." "Exactly. And the Coalition doesn't know how to respond to that. They haven't fought a real war in over 1,000 years. A warning alarm cut through the bridge. Amy's fingers flew across her console. "Captain, multiple contacts dropping out of faster-than-light travel." "It's them. The Crovathan are hitting Talaxon Prime." Jake moved to his command chair. "Battle stations. All hands to combat positions." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, the Valiant Dawn was ready for war. On the main screen, Jake watched as the Crovathan fleet emerged from the dark. There were hundreds of them, bioships that looked like they had been grown rather than built. They moved in swarms, coordinating without any visible communication. The Coalition fleet met them head-on. Crystalline Vaxori warships hung in perfect formation, their weapons firing in synchronized patterns. The insect-like Kelthus vessels moved in geometric precision. The elegant Sindari cruisers danced through space like performers in a ballet. It was beautiful. It was also completely ineffective. The Crovathan ignored the Coalition's formations, swarming around the organized fleet like wolves around deer. For every bioship destroyed, 2 more took its place. They crashed into Coalition vessels without hesitation, sacrificing themselves to create breaches in hulls and shields. "They're getting slaughtered," Amy said, her voice tight with tension. Jake watched as a Vaxori cruiser exploded, its crystalline structure shattering into a million glittering pieces. He thought about Admiral Carter's orders, about protocol and proper channels, about politics and galactic relations. Then he thought about all the people dying on Talaxon Prime, about the Coalition crews fighting with one hand tied behind their backs, bound by rules their enemy didn't follow. "How many Crovathan ships are there?" he asked. "Roughly 300, Amy replied, "against 62 Coalition vessels. And how many of those Coalition vessels are between us and the main swarm?" Amy's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his. Understanding flashed across her face. "None, Captain. The Crovathan have pushed them out of position." Jake stood up from his chair. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. "All crew, this is the captain. In approximately 30 seconds, I'm going to give an order that will likely end my career. Any crew member who refuses to follow it will face no disciplinary action. You have my word." The bridge went silent. Every eye was on him. "But if you stay," Jake continued, "we're going to break every rule the Coalition has about civilized warfare. We're going to fight like humans fight. We're going to fight to win." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Kyle Bennett, standing near the tactical station, grinned like a wolf. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," Jake said, his voice carrying across the bridge, "plot an intercept course for the Crovathan rearguard. Maximum speed. Course plotted, Captain. Sergeant Bennett, get your Marines ready. I want boarding teams on standby." "Aye, sir." Kyle was already moving toward the door, speaking into his comm unit. "Dr. Chang, I need you to analyze Crovathan biosignatures. Find me their weak points." Lisa nodded, her fingers already moving across her console. Jake sat back down in his command chair and activated the ship-wide comm. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going in. Fight smart, fight dirty, and come home alive. Morrison out." The Valiant Dawn's engines roared to life, pushing the ship forward at speeds that made the hull groan. They cut through space like a knife, leaving the safety of their observation position far behind. "Coalition vessels are hailing us," Amy reported. "Multiple channels. They're ordering us to stand down." "Ignore them," Jake said. He watched the tactical display as they closed in on the Crovathan swarm. His mind was already working through tactics, discarding everything he knew about galactic combat doctrine and falling back on older, harder lessons. Humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. They had perfected the art of killing long before they reached the stars. The Coalition had forgotten how to fight like that, bound by centuries of peace and honor codes. But Jake Morrison remembered. His species remembered. "Entering weapons range in 10 seconds, Amy said. "Target their communications clusters. Forget the big ships. Hit them where it hurts." "That's against Coalition rules of engagement, sir." "I know." Jake leaned forward in his chair, watching the swarm grow larger on the screen. "Fire when ready." The Valiant Dawn opened fire, and the battle for Talaxon Prime changed forever. The age of civilized warfare was ending. The age of legends was beginning. The Valiant Dawn's weapons lit up the darkness of space with brilliant streams of energy. Each shot found its target with precision that made the Coalition observers gasp. But Jake Morrison wasn't aiming at the enemy warships. He was targeting the small pulsing nodes that connected the Crovathan swarm to each other. "Direct hits on 7 communication clusters," Amy Rodriguez called out from her station. "The swarm formation is breaking apart." On the tactical display, Jake watched as sections of the Crovathan fleet began moving erratically. Without their coordination, they were just individual ships, dangerous but confused. The Coalition forces, still maintaining their perfect formations, began to push forward. "They're adapting already," Dr. Lisa Chang warned, her eyes glued to her screens. "New communication patterns forming. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they compensate." "Then we don't waste time," Jake said. He opened a channel to the hangar bay. "Sergeant Bennett, launch your teams." "Already in the tubes, Captain." Kyle's voice crackled back, filled with anticipation. "Give us a target." See those disabled bioships drifting toward the planet? I want you inside them. Find out what makes them tick. Understood. Bennett out. Commander Victor Hayes led the fighter squadron out of the Valiant Dawn's launch bays. 20 small, fast attack craft streaked into the chaos of battle. Victor was young for a squadron commander, barely 30, with reflexes that bordered on superhuman and a complete disregard for his own safety. Reaper Squadron, form up on me, Victor said over the comm. We're going hunting. The fighters didn't engage in elegant dogfights like the Coalition pilots. They moved in packs, coordinating their attacks to overwhelm individual targets. 3 fighters would hit a Crovathan bioship from different angles simultaneously, their combined fire punching through organic armor that single shots couldn't penetrate. A Coalition cruiser, damaged and drifting, sent out a distress signal. Victor saw it on his display and made a split-second decision. Reaper 3 through 8 with me. We're running escort. They dove toward the crippled vessel, weaving between debris and enemy fire. A swarm of smaller Crovathan organisms was closing in on the cruiser, ready to tear it apart. Victor's squadron hit them like a hammer, destroying 12 targets in less than 20 seconds. Coalition vessel, this is Reaper Leader, Victor said, opening a channel to the cruiser. You've got a clear path to friendly lines. Move now while you have the chance. There was a pause, then a response in the musical language of the Sindari. Victor's translator converted it to words he could understand. You violated engagement protocols to save us. Why? Because people were dying, Victor said simply. Now get moving before more show up. Aboard the Valiant Dawn, Lieutenant Greg Sanders was coordinating communications between the human ship and what remained of the Coalition fleet. It was chaos. The Coalition commanders couldn't understand what the Valiant Dawn was doing. Humans were supposed to be primitive, bound by their own crude understanding of warfare. Instead, they were fighting with a creativity and ruthlessness that shocked the elder races. Captain, War Leader Kristallos is demanding to speak with you, Greg reported. He sounds angry. He can wait, Jake said, watching as Kyle Bennett's Marines reached the first disabled bioship. On his screen, he could see helmet camera feeds showing his soldiers cutting through organic matter with plasma torches. Kyle's voice came through, steady despite the horrific sights his team was seeing inside the bioship. Captain, you need to see this. These things aren't ships. They're living creatures. The whole vessel is one organism. Can you disable them? Jake asked. Already working on it. Specialist Torres found what looks like a nerve cluster. She's planting charges now. Specialist Maya Torres was the team's combat engineer, a woman who could build or destroy anything given enough time and explosives. She worked quickly, her hands steady as she placed shaped charges around the pulsing mass of tissue that served as the bioship's brain. Charges set, Maya reported. Everyone out. We've got 30 seconds. The Marines evacuated, their suits propelling them through the zero gravity back toward their transport. Behind them, the charges detonated in a sequence that sent shockwaves through the bioship's entire structure. It spasmed once, then went completely still. It worked, Kyle said with satisfaction. This thing is dead. Good, Jake replied. There are 40 more disabled bioships in this sector. You know what to do. The battle continued for hours. The Valiant Dawn darted through the combat zone like a shark, striking at targets of opportunity and vanishing before the Crovathan could respond effectively. It was exhausting, brutal work, but it was working. The swarm was losing cohesion, breaking into smaller groups that the Coalition forces could handle. Then everything changed. Captain, massive energy signature detected, Amy said, her voice tight with alarm. Something big is coming through. On the main screen, space itself seemed to tear apart. A bioship 3 times larger than anything they had seen emerged from the rift. It was massive, covered in weapons that pulsed with sickly green light. Smaller organisms swarmed around it like flies around a corpse. That's their command ship, Lisa said, her face pale. And it's charging weapons. Those energy readings. Captain, that's a planet killer. Jake felt ice in his stomach. If that weapon fired, Talaxon Prime and its 10 million inhabitants would simply cease to exist. The Coalition fleet was too far out of position to intercept. The only ship close enough was the Valiant Dawn. All crew, this is the captain, Jake said, his voice calm despite his racing heart. Abandon ship. I repeat, all crew abandon ship immediately. You have 3 minutes to reach the escape pods. Amy turned in her chair, her eyes wide. Captain, what are you doing? Saving those people down there, Jake said. Now go. That's an order, Lieutenant. No, Amy's voice was firm. With respect, sir. You'll need someone to fly this ship while you aim it. I'm staying. Greg Sanders stood up from his station. Navigation is pretty important too, Captain. I'm staying. One by one, the bridge crew refused to leave. Jake looked at their faces and saw the same determination he felt. They were willing to die to save millions of people they had never met. It was the most human thing he had ever witnessed. Very well, Jake said quietly. All other crew evacuate now. Bridge crew, strap in. This is going to be rough. The Valiant Dawn accelerated. Its engines pushed beyond their safety limits. The ship groaned under the stress, metal screaming as they gained speed. On the screen, the Crovathan command ship grew larger and larger. Its weapon was almost fully charged, green energy swirling in a massive cannon that pointed directly at the planet. Collision in 40 seconds, Greg announced. Their point defense systems are tracking us. Evasive pattern Delta, Jake ordered. The ship jinked left and right, avoiding the streams of weapons fire that tried to knock them off course. Amy, transfer all power to forward shields, everything. Done, we're committed now, Captain. No turning back. Jake gripped the arms of his chair, watching the command ship fill their entire viewport. He could see the details of its organic hull, the pulsing veins of biomatter, the clusters of weapons tracking them. 20 seconds, 15:10. It's been an honor serving with all of you, Jake said. Likewise, Captain, Amy replied. The Valiant Dawn struck the Crovathan command ship directly in the weapon port, punching through layers of organic armor like a bullet through flesh. The ship's reactor, pushed beyond all limits, was already starting to overload. Jake had timed it perfectly. At the last second, the emergency transport system activated. It was a new technology, barely tested, designed to beam crew members out of a dying ship. Jake felt the familiar tingle of molecular disassembly. Then everything went white. He materialized on the surface of Talaxon Prime, along with his bridge crew and the Marines who had been working outside the ship. Above them, the Crovathan command ship exploded in a fireball visible across the entire hemisphere. Debris rained down through the atmosphere, burning up in brilliant streaks of light. Jake collapsed to his knees, his legs shaking. They had done it. The planet was saved. But the Valiant Dawn, his ship, was gone. Coalition rescue ships arrived within hours, led by war leader Kristallos himself. The crystalline alien stood before Jake, who was sitting with his crew among the ruins of what had been a Talaxon city. Thousands of refugees surrounded them, a mix of Talaxon civilians and coalition soldiers who had been stranded when their ships were destroyed. Captain Morrison, Kristallos said slowly, your actions today violated 17 separate articles of the Galactic Warfare Conventions. Your tactics were barbaric, your strategy was without honor, and your sacrifice of your vessel was wasteful. Jake looked up at the war leader, too tired to care about consequences. But you saved 10 million lives, Kristallos continued. His crystalline features seemed to shimmer in the fading light. My fleet lost 43 ships today. Yours alone destroyed or disabled over 100 enemy vessels. You broke every rule we hold sacred, and in doing so, you showed us that our rules were obsolete. The war leader extended a hand to Jake, helping him to his feet. Around them, the mixed crowd of survivors watched in silence. The Coalition owes you a debt, Captain Morrison, Kristallos said. And more importantly, we owe you the truth. We cannot win this war fighting. 6 months after Talaxon Prime, the war had spread like a disease across 17 star systems. The Crovathan swarm seemed endless, adapting to every tactic the Coalition threw at them. But there was one force they struggled to predict, one enemy they couldn't seem to counter. Humanity. Commodore Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the carrier Iron Will. It was twice the size of the Valiant Dawn, with enough firepower to level a small moon. But more importantly, it carried 3,000 Marines and 50 fighter craft. It was built for the kind of war Jake had learned to fight. Commodore, General Pierce's shuttle is requesting permission to dock, Amy Rodriguez said from her station. She was his executive officer now, promoted after Talaxon Prime. The scar on her left arm was a reminder of that battle, a burn from when they had materialized in the middle of a firefight. Permission granted, Jake said. He straightened his uniform and prepared to meet the man Earth had sent to take command of all human military operations in Coalition space. General Nathan Pierce was everything Jake expected. Tall, gray-haired, with enough medals on his chest to weigh down a smaller man, he walked onto the bridge like he owned it, his cold eyes scanning every station, every crew member. Behind him walked his aides, all carrying tablets and looking important. Commodore Morrison, Pierce said, his voice like gravel. I've read your reports. Impressive work at Talixan Prime. Thank you, sir. But also reckless, undisciplined, and completely against protocol. Pierce's expression didn't change, which is exactly what we need. I'm not here to replace you, Morrison. I'm here to give you more ships and tell you to do what you do best. Jake felt tension he didn't know he was carrying Drain away. What's the mission, General? Meridian Station. Industrial world. 40 billion tons of manufacturing capacity per year. The Crovathan are moving to take it. If they succeed, the Coalition loses its primary weapons production. The war is over. Amy brought up a tactical display of Meridian Station. The planet was a fortress, ringed with defensive satellites and protected by 3 Coalition fleets. Sir, that looks heavily defended. Why are we worried? Because the Coalition is defending it the old way, Pierce said. Honor duels, measured responses, protecting every inch of ground. The Crovathan will swarm them, adapt, and eventually break through. It might take weeks or months, but they'll win. So what's your plan? Jake asked. Pierce smiled for the first time, and it was not a pleasant expression. Your plan, actually. I want you to evacuate the civilians and turn the entire planet into a trap. The next few days were chaos. Captain Olivia Grant commanded the carrier Iron Resolve, part of the growing human fleet that now numbered over 200 ships. She coordinated the evacuation of Meridian Station's 20 million civilians while Jake and his team planned the trap. This is insane, Lieutenant Sophie Lynn said, studying the data on her screen. Sophie was young, barely 25, but she had cracked the Crovathan communication codes during the battle for Talixan Prime. Her intelligence work had been crucial to human success. You want to turn the factories into bombs? Not just bombs, Chief Petty Officer Danny Walsh said with an enormous grin. Danny was a demolitions expert who loved his job way too much. Massive planet-wide chain reaction bombs. It'll be beautiful. It'll be genocide, Sophie said quietly. The room went silent. Jake looked at the young officer, seeing the doubt in her eyes. It was a doubt he shared late at night when he couldn't sleep. War's about making hard choices, Jake said finally. The Crovathan won't surrender. They won't negotiate. They're programmed to kill until nothing else exists. So we do what we must to survive. Sophie nodded slowly, but Jake could see she wasn't entirely convinced. He didn't blame her. He wasn't entirely convinced either. Kyle Bennett's Marines worked with the evacuation teams, helping to get civilians off the planet. The sergeant had been promoted to lieutenant after Talixan Prime, but he still led from the front. Still wore his battered armor with its collection of scars and dents. Last transport is away, Kyle reported to Jake. Meridian Station is empty except for our demo teams. Good. Danny, how long do you need? Give me 72 hours and I'll give you hell, Danny replied, already heading for the shuttle bay with his team. The Coalition High Command was furious when they learned of the plan. War Leader Kristallos contacted Jake directly, his crystalline face showing what might have been anger. You cannot destroy Meridian Station, Kristallos said. It is a cultural heritage site. The factories there have produced art and beauty for 3 centuries, and now it will produce victory, Jake replied. With respect, War Leader, we don't have the luxury of sentiment. Either we use this planet as a weapon or we lose it and the war. This is not how civilized beings wage war. No, Jake agreed. It's how humans wage war, and right now that's what you need. General Pierce backed Jake's plan, and with Earth's full support, the Coalition had no choice but to agree. The Crovathan swarm was detected 3 days later, exactly as predicted. Millions of bioships all heading for Meridian Station. The Coalition fleet retreated according to plan, making it look like they were abandoning the system. The Crovathan took the bait, their swarm descending on the empty planet like locusts on a harvest field. They spread across the surface, searching for targets, finding only empty cities and silent factories. They're in position, Sophie reported from her intelligence station. Nexus organisms are deploying across the planet's surface. The Nexus organisms were the key. Sophie had discovered them months ago. They were specialized Crovathan that coordinated swarm behavior, acting like living communication hubs. If you killed the Nexus, the swarm lost coordination. Execute Phase 2, Jake ordered. Olivia Grant's carrier group dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above Meridian Station. so close to the planet that gravitational forces pulled on their hulls. The surprise was complete. The Cravathon on the surface barely had time to react before the drop pods began falling. Kyle Bennett led the first wave, 3,000 Marines in heavy armor plunging through the atmosphere like meteors. They landed in precise patterns, each squad with specific targets. Not factories. Not defensive positions. Nexus organisms, contact! Kyle's voice came through the comm, accompanied by weapons fire. We've got bugs everywhere. Moving to primary target. The fighting was brutal. The Cravathon, caught by surprise, fought back with savage intensity. But the Marines had trained for this, had studied Cravathon tactics for months. They moved in small teams, covering each other, using the planet's infrastructure as both weapon and shield. Danny Walsh's team reached Factory Complex 7, one of the largest industrial sites on the planet. Inside the massive building, production lines sat silent, but Danny had transformed them into something new. Explosive charges lined every structure, connected by a network of triggers that would create a cascading failure. Detonator is set, Danny reported. Say the word and this whole section goes up. Across the planet, similar reports came in. 20 major factory complexes, 50 mining operations, hundreds of smaller facilities, all rigged to explode in a carefully orchestrated sequence. But first, they needed to eliminate the Nexus organisms. Sophie Lynn watched her screens from orbit, tracking the electromagnetic signatures that identified Nexus creatures. I'm marking targets for the ground teams. Kyle, you've got 3 Nexus organisms within 1 kilometer of your position. Understood. Moving to engage. The Marines hunted the Nexus organisms with ruthless efficiency. These creatures were larger than normal Cravathon, covered in specialized organs that allowed them to coordinate the swarm. They were also heavily protected. Each one required concentrated firepower to bring down. Kyle's squad cornered one in the ruins of a residential district. The creature was the size of a truck, with dozens of writhing appendages and a pulsing membrane that glowed with bioluminescent signals. It was directing hundreds of smaller Cravathon, coordinating their search for the human intruders. Focus fire on the central mass, Kyle ordered. His squad opened up with everything they had. Plasma bolts, railgun rounds, and micro-missiles all struck the Nexus organism simultaneously. It screamed, a sound that came through as static on the comm channels, and collapsed. Instantly, the Cravathon in the surrounding area began moving erratically. Without the Nexus to guide them, they were confused, aggressive, but uncoordinated. Across Meridian Station, the same scene played out dozens of times. Marine squads isolated and destroyed Nexus organisms, creating pockets of chaos throughout the Cravathon swarm. The precision of the operation was something the Coalition had never seen before. Humans fighting not for honor or glory, but with calculated brutality designed for maximum effect. All primary targets eliminated, Kyle reported. We're extracting to the pickup zones. Negative, Jake said from orbit. Hold your positions. It's time for the fireworks. Danny Walsh activated the first sequence. Factory Complex 7 exploded in a massive fireball that could be seen from space. The explosion triggered a chain reaction. Secondary explosions racing through connected facilities like wildfire. Within seconds, half the industrial sector was burning. The Cravathon tried to flee, their bioships launching from the surface. But that was part of the trap too. Olivia Grant's fighter squadrons were. The war had been raging for 2 years now, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Humanity's Task Force Terran was no longer just a small group of ships operating on the edge of Coalition space. It had become the primary military force fighting the Cravathon, with human officers commanding fleets that mixed dozens of species. Colonel Marcus Webb stood in the briefing room of his Special Operations ship, looking at the team he had assembled. They called themselves the Reaper Corps, and looking at them, it was easy to see why. There were 3 Vaxuri commandos, their crystalline bodies modified with combat enhancements. 2 Kelthus infiltrators, small and quick, perfect for sneaking into enemy territory, and 15 human soldiers, each one a veteran of dozens of combat drops. Listen up, Marcus said, pulling up a holographic map of Cravathon-controlled space. Command has identified a Nexus hub on the planet Krevoth 4. Intelligence suggests it's coordinating swarm movements across 3 sectors. We're going to destroy it. One of the Vaxuri, a warrior named Crystalline Edge, tilted his head. This mission violates the Accords of Honorable Combat. We will be striking a target without formal declaration of war status. The Crovathan don't care about the Accords, Marcus replied. They didn't care when they killed 3 billion people on your homeworld. So we're going to fight them the human way. Questions? There were no questions. Over the past year, even the most traditional coalition soldiers had learned to adapt. Fight by the old rules and you died. Fight like humans and you might just survive. The Reaper Corps infiltrated Krevoth 4 under cover of a meteor shower, their ships disguised as debris. They landed on the dark side of the planet, in a region so hostile that even the Crovathan avoided it. The temperature was 200 degrees below freezing, and the atmosphere was toxic. Perfect cover. Sergeant First Class Ryan Cole led the ground team through the frozen wasteland. Ryan was 32, with ice-blue eyes that had seen too much death. His squad had fought in every major battle since Talixon Prime. They were the most decorated unit in the fleet, and also the one with the highest casualty rate. Movement ahead. One of the Kelthus infiltrators clicked in their language. The translator in Ryan's helmet converted it to words. Crovathan patrol 6 organisms, light weapons. Take them quiet, Ryan ordered. The Kelthus moved like shadows, their 4 arms wielding blades that could cut through organic matter like paper. The Crovathan patrol died without making a sound. The Vaxori commandos, at first disturbed by such ruthless tactics, had learned to appreciate their efficiency. The Nexus Hub was built into the side of a mountain, a massive organic structure that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. Thousands of Crovathan moved around it like ants around a colony. Getting inside would be impossible for a traditional assault force, but the Reaper Corps didn't do traditional assaults. Marcus Webb had brought along a secret weapon. Dr. Alex Jordan, one of Earth's top bioweapons researchers, had developed something special. A virus that didn't kill the Crovathan, but disrupted their communication with Nexus organisms. It would turn the coordinated swarm into confused individuals. Deploying the virus now, Alex said, releasing canisters into the air filtration system of the Nexus Hub. He was a thin man with nervous hands, uncomfortable being this close to combat. But his work was essential. Within minutes, the effects became visible. Crovathan warriors began moving erratically, attacking each other, wandering in circles. The Nexus Hub's bioluminescence flickered and dimmed. It's working, Ryan reported, moving to primary objective. The Reaper Corps fought their way into the Nexus Hub, facing confused but still deadly Crovathan defenders. The fighting was savage. Ryan's squad used explosives, flamethrowers, and experimental weapons that the Coalition would have banned as too cruel. But cruelty was relative when your enemy wanted to exterminate all life in the galaxy. They reached the central chamber where the Nexus organisms gathered. These were the largest specimens anyone had seen, each one the size of a building, their bodies covered in communication organs that connected them to millions of other Crovathan across multiple star systems. Plant the charges, Marcus ordered. We've got 5 minutes before the virus wears off. Specialist Maya Torres, now a sergeant herself, worked with her demo team to place nuclear charges around the Nexus organisms. The creatures seemed aware of what was happening, their communication organs pulsing frantically, trying to call for help that would arrive too late. Charges set. Let's move. The Reaper Corps evacuated at a dead run, fighting through waves of Crovathan who were starting to recover from the virus. 2 Vaxori commandos were killed covering the retreat. Ryan's squad lost 3 soldiers, but they made it to the extraction point just as the charges detonated. The explosion vaporized the Nexus Hub and everything within 5 kilometers. Across 3 sectors, Crovathan swarm coordination collapsed. Coalition forces, waiting for this moment, launched coordinated attacks that drove the disorganized enemy back dozens of light years. The mission was a success, but it came at a cost that went beyond the soldiers who died. Back at Coalition headquarters, Lieutenant Commander Zoe Parker was fighting a different kind of war. She ran the Psychological Operations Division, using propaganda and terror tactics to break Crovathan morale. Her methods were controversial, to put it mildly. You're broadcasting what? Admiral Christina Blake asked, staring at Zoe's latest proposal. Blake had taken command of the Coalition fleet after General Pierce died in an attack on Earth itself. She was tough, fair, and willing to make hard decisions. But even she had limits. Death metal music mixed with recordings of Crovathan being killed, Zoe explained calmly. She was a small woman with a soft voice, which made her ideas seem even more disturbing. We also include testimonials from captured Crovathan, describing how they fear humans. It's psychological warfare, Admiral. It works. It's also potentially torture. They're trying to exterminate every living thing in the galaxy, Zoe replied. I'm just making them think twice before they attack our positions. Every Crovathan who hesitates is one less soldier shooting at our people. Blake approved the plan, but Zoe could see the doubt in her eyes. The methods humanity used to win this war were creating moral questions that would haunt them for generations. Meanwhile, Dr. Alex Jordan's bioweapon had become the subject of heated debate within the coalition. The Sindari, with their telepathic sensitivity, found the idea of biological warfare deeply disturbing. They argued that using such weapons was no different than what the Crovathan did. It's completely different, Alex argued during a council session. The Crovathan want to kill everything. We just want them to stop attacking us. The virus doesn't kill. It just disrupts their ability to coordinate. But you could modify it to kill, a Sindari counselor pointed out. The potential for genocide is there. The potential for genocide is already here, Jake Morrison said, standing up to address the council. He had been promoted to admiral now, commanding the entire human battle fleet. The Crovathan have killed over 20 billion sentient beings in the past 2 years. They won't stop. They can't stop. So we use every weapon we have to survive. The council voted to allow limited use of the bioweapon. It was a close vote, and Jake knew that many council members regretted it even as they raised their hands in approval. Then the Crovathan proved why such weapons were necessary. They attacked Earth itself. The assault came without warning. A massive swarm, larger than anything seen before, dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above humanity's homeworld. Billions of bioships all coordinating for a single purpose: the complete destruction of the human species. Captain Amy Rodriguez, now commanding her own destroyer called the Defiant, was part of Earth's defense fleet. She watched in horror as the Crovathan swarm darkened the sky like a plague of locusts. All ships battle formation echo, she ordered her small task force. We hold them at the orbital defense line. Nothing gets through to the surface. The battle for Earth was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Crovathan threw themselves at the human defenses with suicidal fury. They crashed into orbital stations, detonated themselves against defensive satellites, and used bioships as living missiles against Earth's fleet. Ryan Cole's Marine Company fought a desperate defense of Orbital Station Washington, where General Pierce had made his headquarters before his death. The Crovathan boarded the station in waves, their organisms flooding through every breach in the hull. Fall back to Section 7, Ryan ordered his exhausted troops. They had been fighting for 18 hours straight. His armor was scorched and dented, his ammunition running low. Set charges on the bulkheads. We're sealing them in. The charges detonated, cutting off entire sections of the station. Thousands of Crovathan were trapped in those sections when Ryan vented them to space. It bought them time, but not much. On the surface, millions of civilians watched the battle in the sky. Weapons fire lit up the night like fireworks. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes. Debris rained down, burning up in the atmosphere. Everyone knew that if the orbital defenses fell, Earth would die. Admiral Jake Morrison arrived with the main battle fleet after a desperate faster-than-light jump that pushed his ships beyond safe limits. The coalition assembled the largest military force in galactic history, 15,000 warships from 47 different species, all gathered in the darkness between stars. At the center of this massive fleet was the human dreadnought Titan's Wrath, its hull now covered with so many names of fallen ships that you could barely see the original metal underneath. Admiral Christina Blake stood on the bridge, looking at the tactical display that showed their destination. The breeding grounds, the Crovathan homeworld, the source of the nightmare that had consumed the galaxy for the past 3 years. Final status report, she said to her assembled command staff. All ships report ready, Admiral Jake Morrison replied. He was her second in command now, leading the human contingent of the invasion force. His hair had gone gray over the past year, and new lines marked his face. War aged everyone, but command aged you faster. Coalition forces are positioned according to the battle plan, war leader Kristallos added. The Vaxori had changed too. His crystalline body now bore scars where weapons fire had chipped away pieces that would never grow back. Battle damage worn like metals. Blake nodded slowly. Then we proceed. All ships prepare for faster-than-light jump. We're going in. The fleet jumped together, thousands of ships tearing through space in a coordinated movement that required perfect timing. Any ship that arrived too early or too late would be vulnerable, alone against whatever defenses waited at the breeding grounds. Captain Frank Marshall commanded the second human dreadnought, the Revenge, named after all the people who had died and could not be avenged until now. Frank was 50 years old, a career officer who had trained most of the younger captains in the fleet. He watched his crew work with pride. They were ready for this. They had to be. Lieutenant Sam Richardson sat at the communication station on the Revenge, fresh from the academy and terrified beyond words. This was his first major battle, and it would likely be his last. Everyone knew the statistics. 40% casualties were expected in the first wave, 60% in the second. By the time they reached the breeding ground surface, the fleet would be down to a fraction of its original strength. But they were going anyway. Because if they didn't end this here, the Crovathan would just rebuild and attack again in 10 years or 20 or 50. This had to be the final battle. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the breeding ground system. What they saw made even the most experienced officers pause in shock. The planet was covered in organic structures that stretched kilometers into the sky. Massive bioships were being grown in vast birthing pits, millions of them in various stages of development. The space around the planet was thick with defensive organisms, more Crovathan than anyone had ever seen in one place. Sensors are reading over 50 billion individual organisms in this system, Lieutenant Sophie Lynn reported, her voice tight with stress. And those are just the ones big enough to track. All ships commence attack, Blake ordered. First wave, create a breach in their orbital defenses. Second wave, support the landing craft. Third wave, prepare to provide covering fire for the ground assault. The battle began. It was hell made manifest. The Crovathan defenders threw themselves at the coalition fleet with desperate fury. They weren't just protecting their homeworld. They were protecting their entire species' future. Every bioship grown here represented millions more Crovathan that could be spawned across the galaxy. Captain Amy Rodriguez commanded her destroyer Defiant as part of the first wave. She led a squadron of 20 ships directly into the thickest concentration of Crovathan defenders. Her tactical officer called out targets faster than the weapons could fire. Her helmsman dodged and weaved through swarms of enemy organisms that tried to board them. Direct hit on starboard side, her damage control officer reported. Hull breach on deck 5, emergency force fields holding. Keep us moving, Amy ordered. We stop, we die. The Defiant's sister ships weren't as lucky. She watched as the destroyer Valiant took critical damage and began to spiral out of control. Its captain gave the order to abandon ship and escape pods began launching. But many didn't make it before the ship's reactor detonated. Commander Victor Hayes led the fighter screen. Thousands of small attack craft that swarmed through the battle like angry wasps. Victor was 35 now, one of the oldest fighter pilots still flying combat missions. Most pilots burned out or died long before reaching his age. Reaper Squadron with me, Victor called over the comm. We're clearing a path for the landing craft. His squadron dove toward the planet's surface, their weapons creating a tunnel through the Crovathan defenders. Behind them came the massive landing ships, each one carrying thousands of Marines. The landing craft were slow, heavily armored, and completely vulnerable without fighter support. Master Sergeant Elena Cruz was aboard one of those landing craft. She was 43, had trained 3 generations of Marines, and had fought in more battles than most officers would ever see. She walked through the troop compartment, checking on her soldiers, offering words of encouragement or just a firm hand on a shoulder. 5 minutes to landing, the pilot announced. It's going to be hot. Hot was an understatement. The landing craft punched through the planet's atmosphere under continuous fire. 3 craft were destroyed before reaching the surface. Elena's ship made it down, but barely. The landing was more of a controlled crash than an actual landing. Everyone out. Move, 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 Elena shouted as the ramps dropped. Her Marines poured out into hell itself. The breeding grounds were a nightmare landscape. Organic structures pulsed with life. The ground itself seemed to breathe. And everywhere, Crovathan warriors emerged to defend their home. But these weren't the normal swarm organisms. These were defenders, larger and more heavily armored, fighting with a desperation that made them even more dangerous. Kyle Bennett, now a major, commanded the assault on the primary berthing complex. His battalion of Marines fought through waves of defenders, using every trick and tactic they had learned over 3 years of war. They used flamethrowers to burn through organic walls, explosives to collapse enemy fortifications, and when all else failed, they fought hand-to-hand with knives and makeshift weapons. "We're getting reports from all sectors," Colonel Marcus Webb said from his command post. "The Crovathan are fighting harder than we've ever seen. They know what's at stake." "So do we," Jake Morrison replied. He was coordinating the entire ground assault from orbit, watching as thousands of coalition soldiers fought and died on the planet below. "Push forward. We can't give them time to adapt." The fighting lasted for 6 weeks. It was the longest, bloodiest battle of the war. Every meter of ground was bought with lives. Every building complex required a new assault plan. The Crovathan fought for every inch of their homeworld, and the coalition paid for every inch with blood. But slowly, inexorably, the coalition forces pushed deeper into the planet. Toward the core nexus. Sophie Lynn had discovered its existence 3 months ago, analyzing captured Crovathan communications. The core nexus was the original queen organism, the first Crovathan ever created millions of years ago. It had been directing the swarm all this time, following programming that was older than most civilizations. Lieutenant Ryan Cole's squad was the first to reach the core nexus chamber. They had fought through 3 kilometers of tunnels, losing more than half their strength to get here. What they found made them stop in awe and horror. The core nexus was massive. It filled a chamber the size of a small city, its body a twisted mass of organic matter covered in billions of neural connections. It pulsed with light, and when Ryan's translator picked up its signals, he heard something he never expected. Thoughts, not commands or instincts. "Actual thoughts, please." The core nexus communicated through electromagnetic pulses that Ryan's equipment translated to words. "Give us purpose. Give us orders. We were made to serve. We do not understand how to exist without commands." Ryan froze. This wasn't the mindless monster they had been fighting. This was something that had been programmed to obey, then abandoned by its creators and left alone for millions of years. It had gone mad from isolation, but it was still trying to follow its original directive: protect and serve. It had just forgotten who to protect and serve. Jake Morrison received Ryan's report and made a decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. He contacted Dr. Lisa Chang, who had been studying Crovathan biology since the beginning of the war. "Can you reprogram it?" Jake asked. "Give it new directives that don't involve killing everything?" "Maybe," Lisa replied carefully. "But it would require a direct neural link. Someone would have to merge their consciousness with the Nexus long enough to rewrite its core programming. The neural feedback would be massive. Whoever does it probably won't survive." Jake stood up from his command chair. "Prepare the equipment." "I'm going down there," Amy Rodriguez immediately protested. "Jake, you can't. You're the admiral. The fleet needs you." "The fleet needs someone to end this war," Jake replied. "I broke protocol at Talax and Prime to save lives. I destroyed Meridian Station to win a battle. I've made every hard choice this war demanded. This is just one more. Admiral Blake didn't try to stop him." She understood. Some burdens only the person in command could carry.